Excellent. Let's get this started. Everybody, welcome to the first episode, the pilot episode actually, of New Work Snacks, our lunchtime webinar series all around new work for business leaders. I have been told to stall a minute or so that more people can join us. So I'm just going to use this time to show you a little bit my setup and how I have prepared. I have, first of all, my time timer. You can see it here. We have 30 minutes as a post-lunch energizer. I hope I can be on time. I'll do my best. My teammates have promised to throw things at me if I lose myself in the depths of the new work history. How do I energize myself for this? This is not product placement. This is just how I run on events like this. I have been drinking Club Mate. That is also why I'm probably talking fast. I have prepared my notes here that you can see. As you can see, we will be mostly talking about new work for business leaders in 30 minutes. I would say that we're almost ready to start. I have actually put a bear here to remind me to ask for forgiveness, or in other words, please bear with us, because this is our pilot webinar. We have new hardware, we have new software. We tested everything and it was great in the test runs, but you know how the world works. Of course, it's not going to work perfectly when we are live. So in that case, we have a backup plan. Just give us a minute and we will be back. Okay, let's get started, everybody. Welcome. My name is Darius Moeini. I'm the founder of BIA. Everything I do personally is all about unlocking productivity for middle management. That's what I care about and talk about all day long, every day. If you want to connect with me, please do so. Best to meet me on LinkedIn. This is my preferred channel. There's only one Darius Moeini, so it's going to be easy to find me. Just connect with me whenever you want. So, BIA. Who are we? We're a small agency, a boutique agency, as one says, in the middle of Berlin. We've just recently moved to Torstraße, into a very nice office. So if you're in Berlin, feel free to visit us after the pandemic, of course. We are an innovation agency and academy, mostly working with large and medium-sized organizations on leadership training, on change programs, and innovation management. Our superpower generally is always people ask, what's your superpower? It's always translating startup mindset and agile techniques into the worlds of corporate middle management. We're currently super excited because we are launching for the first time ever an open enrollment masterclass. Usually we work for teams, but now we are launching for the beginning of February, actually, an open class where individuals can sign up to join a 3 months, actually 6 weeks, plus 6 weeks community masterclass, new work in action. If you like the content that you will see in here in the next few minutes, you should listen to the features of the masterclass and how to get enrolled at the end of this webinar. Let's get started on new work for business leaders. Why new work for business leaders? What is the point of making that point of view so explicit and so prominent? In the last few years, there was a lot of conversation, there was a lot of change, there's a lot of traction for different types of methodologies, cultures, trends that have quite the overlap of topical and tool-wise content, but have been looked at from a very different perspective and have been given a different narrative for each of the sections. So new work generally is it's predominantly a topic for HR or change or transformation teams. So all of the themes and techniques that you usually hear in the new work world are quite driven by HR needs and HR language. Then we have agile methodologies. Of course, you know, starting with Scrum, but all of the other agile methodologies as well, sprint culture. Often this area, as powerful as it is for everybody in any organization, is quite dominated or quite focused and centered around technology teams and engineering teams, which is great, but I think it deserves to be scaled to all of the business functions in an organization. And the third one is org design. Some call it org design, some call it digital transformation, some call it agile transformation rather. Very interesting topics, whether it's transformation themes, agile organization themes, even the Spotify model that is known to a lot of people. incredibly interesting stuff. However, sometimes not that relatable to middle management. You are running your business, you are running your topical area. You're not in the business of quickly, within a few months, changing the entire organization. So what we want to do here is to take all of these ideas and mindsets and tools and put it into the point of view, the POV of middle managers or leaders, anybody who's running a project or a team, or is a change maker or wants to become one, in bigger and medium-sized organizations. Agenda for this webinar. So I'm going to spend some time, not too much, on the definition of what actually is new work. Let's try to frame it a little bit, to scope it a little bit, yeah? Then I'm going to talk about you, specifically about what is your new role as a leader or operational leader or strategic leader in a bigger or medium-sized organization. What has changed over time and how does it translate into what we want to talk about mostly, the operating system, a new way to look at an organization and to frame what you can do with it, how you can influence it, how you can change it, right? We actually have a canvas that I will make available to you that can help you to get started with your big or small change initiative or productivity boost. At the end of this webinar, I'll show you the canvas and how to actually use it. So what is new work? If you want to talk about new work, let's take a step back and talk about old work, just to give you a little bit of a historical contextualization. So, traditionally, after or during the Second Industrial Revolution, we had the rise of Taylorism. Taylorism was, or scientific management, as it was officially called, was all about separating thinking and working, so cognitive work versus manual labor. So the famous quote from Taylorism is, "Let the managers do the thinking and the workers do the working." That worked wonders in a time, Second Industrial Revolution, when during the rise of assembly lines. Right? That, of course, changed over time. We created a new level of business, not only top-level executive and overhead and production, but also the business layer in the middle. So the last century was all driven by, mostly a lot of theories came from Peter Drucker, you know him, but mostly driven by two walls or two themes in management theory. On the one hand is how do we form our organization to follow certain objectives. So outcome orientation, management by objective is probably a term that you have heard or even have worked with. So MBOs, right? At the same time, Peter Drucker, by the way, same guy who populated management by objectives, was also the guy who said culture eats strategy for breakfast. Right, so there is this ambivalence, this objective orientation and strategy, a culture nurturing of an organization, which has worked wonders in the last century. Right? Now we're talking about new work. So changes to these two different worlds, right? So new work, if you want, you can look at Fridtjof Bergmann, who is a researcher, a social scientist, German-speaking, but lives in America, and who wrote the book Neue Arbeit, New Work. Right? So a lot of people refer to him or his book and his work when they talk about new work. I'm not the biggest fan. I like it. It's a bit kooky. It's a bit out there. But it does one thing. It brings us to the following statement. We want to connect work with life and purpose. Right? And that is very powerful. And that piece of his work I love a lot. Right? So connecting life, work, and purpose. So how do we translate that into something understandable and graspable? My very, very shortest definition of new work for you is following. New work is the pursuit of both performance as well as purpose in the workplace. So it's not just about purpose and figuring out what is the North Star of an organization, but it's also about putting things into action, doing purposeful work, increasing performance, regaining productivity in this chaotic managerial environment that we are in. So let's move on. Actually, you know, since sometimes it's not very graspable, it really helps to understand what are the mega trends that are influencing new work, right? So to me, really new work is, how do you say this in English? In German, we would say Sammelbegriff. It's like a term that collects every mega trend that is influencing our work experience, right? Let's go through a few, not all of them, but just a few. Let's go through, for example, human centricity. You know, in the past, our society was developed around a organization-centric culture, and that is changing towards a human-centric culture. We see this in business, where customer centricity is on the rise. We see this in organizations where employee centricity is on the rise, or even in healthcare, where patient centricity is one of the hottest topics for all medical professionals, right? But there's other things like triple bottom line, right? So in the past, we used to focus on shareholder maximization, shareholder value maximization, but today it's paramount to understand that every organization and leader has to follow the ideas of a triple bottom line. And the triple bottom line is, so the first one is the traditional one, of course, profit. So you're supposed to make profit, but also planet and people. Organizations now have been given the mandate to serve all three needs: profit, people, and planet. There's so much more with mindset, the rise of startups and how it's changing, digital and data thinking. You know, you used to be able to lead with your gut, with your instincts. Management by instinct was quite appreciated in the past. Today, that doesn't work. Management with data is more zeitgeist than management by intuition. Of course, it's always a mix of those two, but all of these things, even more agile methodologies, new org design, the incredibly unpredictable economy and world, some call it VUCA, all influencing new work and our experience at the workplace. If you want to make it understandable in the organizational context, we at BIA we have six different areas or sectors that we categorize it in. We have new HR, so modern human resources, powerful teams. So how do teams collaborate and get work done? We have progressive leadership. So what is the new relationship between a leader and teams in this agile organization? Of course, agile methodologies that are on the rise everywhere in the organization. Innovation management, quite an important piece. And last but not least, agile organizations. I'm going to show you a slide now, which just gives a quick selection of different I hope this works with the increasing size of the slide. I use this opportunity to drink a little bit of Club Mate. Look at this. There are so many, and this is not even close to be exhaustive. In new HR, you have diversity, inclusion, open office, flexible work, people analytics, mindfulness, powerful teams, meeting culture, digital collaboration, reflective communication or non-violent communication, role-based management, a team performance versus individual performance. In leadership, we have things like growth mindset, decentralized authority, empowering leadership, free information flow, shared decision making. Sprints, Kanban, agile budgeting, even OKR frameworks, agile methods. In innovation, we're talking about startup partnering, idea management. Intrapreneurship is on the rise everywhere in innovation environments and organizations. And when we talk about the organization itself, agile organizations, we're talking about the learning organization, of course, so the ever-changing organization. We're talking about communities, we're talking about dynamic teaming, self-managing teams. Let me actually make the slide again smaller. Very important, organization heartbeat. Let me figure this out. There, does it work? This should be good again. As you can see, there is an infinite amount of practices for middle management. So the good news is, though, that you don't need to implement all of it. Of course not. It's just that you have a toolbox and mindset box and technique box. And your role, of course, is to figure out in your situation, what is it that will bring you to the next level, right? So the toolbox is big. So when I talk about new work, the entire world of all of these mega trends is open to you. And the question is, which ones do you like? Which ones will be useful to you, right? Talking about this, maybe let's take a step back and say, hey, what is the role of a leader and how has it changed? Everybody keeps saying that, but what does it actually literally mean? What do you have to do? Of course, I find it incredibly hard to be in middle management because you have this dilemma. You have the challenges if your business area, your topical area, but also you are supposed to be part of the change makers. You are supposed to be part of influencing the organization to become more performant and agile. It's quite hard. because it's two different things, and sometimes they're not supporting each other because it takes time and resources and energy. So in the past, there was four main roles of a leader or a manager. You were a strategist, so strategist on mostly figuring out what are strategies to serve shareholder value maximization, so shareholder value. And then from there on, you would plan your tactics, you would direct people, and you would control the execution. That would be the role of a traditional leader, right? Very much also building on the command and control culture of the past, right? But today, it's different. It's much more complicated, and it's much more demanding of people. You know, people sometimes say, leadership is like dying because everybody is self-managing. Future teams are self-managing, but actually, in my opinion, leadership has become much more complicated. So first of all, you remain to be a strategist, right? It's just that you even have more things to strategize on. You remember the triple bottom line. So you're not only doing shareholder value maximization, you're doing stakeholder value maximization. Now, in this more complex environment where there is not one right path to go, and you are sharing power with your middle management colleagues, and the variety and plurality of ideas and ways to go ahead, what you have to do is create alliances for your ideas and your agendas, which makes you an entrepreneur, or in the organizational context, an intrapreneur. So for me, the second skill next to strategist for a leader is to become an intrapreneur, or to be an intrapreneur in your organization. Then we have coaching. So we used to direct, now we coach. That is a big piece, and I could talk for hours about what does it actually mean to coach people instead of direct them. And then we're talking about architecture. So you're supposed to be an architect of the workflow, the organization, of the way we do things. How do you remove barriers? How do you empower your teams? Not through coaching, but actually, how do you empower your teams to work well in an organization? So it's the counterpart to the personal coaching, is the organizational architecture. By the way, my clock is not working at all. So it's telling me that we've been talking for 1 minute. I highly doubt that. But we'll find alternative ways to figure out how much time we still have left. So when we talk about architecture of organizations or the workflow, we like to use the term operating system. In the past, we used to have the pyramid, the hierarchical pyramid, the vertical organizational structure, and we used to have the horizontal value chain for the processes in an organization. But now we're looking at it not only 1 and 2 dimensional, we're looking at it 3-dimensional from all of the different points of views and realities of an organization. And because it's much more complex than that, right? So figuring out how an organization works and how things are getting done requires more cognitive work to figure out this madness of an organization. On the one hand, this is what we know. We have the explicit systems, right? And these are organizational structure, right? These are the governance systems. How are big decisions made? These are process flows and company rhythms, whatever rhythm you have in your organization. These are the explicit systems. But also, the reality is that implicit systems are actually even at least as important to understand for a leader. You know that better than anybody else, to make things happen in an organization. So we have the culture, the organizational culture that is everywhere in the organization, is an omnipresent situation in reality. You have rituals between people, and rituals are a constantly changing, moving culture for itself. So what do people do when they're in a room? You have work techniques, and they differ from organization to organization. How does something get done in your environment? So the work technique is very, very important. And generally speaking, the ways of doing things, they're very different in every organization. And it requires a lot of experience to understand that in an organization. That is what we call the operating system, to put all of this together into one understandable framework or system. I want to give you an example of something explicit and something implicit real quick. So many organizations, they use the quarterly business review as their rhythm to do reporting to the top, but also to iterate on their strategies. So the quarterly business review is usually the framework or the rhythm to do a lot of strategic work. That's an explicit system. An implicit system, though, could be attached to something like an explicit system as well. What you know is probably the fiscal year. Many organizations have a fiscal year, right? So it's not the calendar year, it's a fiscal year. Let's just say the fiscal year starts in October, right? So as you know, there is the budgeting deadline, probably 3-4 months before that. So before the fiscal year starts, there is the negotiation on the budgets for the next fiscal year. So fiscal year start minus 3 months, that's the deadline for the budget. That is the explicit piece. The implicit piece of an organization is that all major decisions usually happen in those 2 months in that decision window shortly before the deadline of the budgets. It's not an official rule, but it's how things are done in an organization. And that is something that is, that from my experience, and I've been to so many companies inside, defines so much about the way things are done in the organization. Explicit and implicit ways of doing things. So, having said that, coming back to your role as a leader, as a change maker, or a middle manager, right? So what you want to do is you want to figure out, where do you have the impacts? Where do you have the resources to make change, to influence the organization, right? What are some actionable challenges that you can take on? And for me, for business functions especially, also for HR and tech and everything, but especially for business functions as well, there are four pieces that really have the most potential to be instantly implemented and to create instant productivity boosts. So generally speaking, it's improving productivity, it's accelerating projects, it's innovating on your workflow, or just generally reinventing leadership, right? 4 big pieces, 4 actionable challenges for middle managers, right? So if we are here, if we know that I'm a middle manager and I want to get something done, at least one of these 4 areas, how do I go about it, right? What would be a good start? So I know I want to understand, I have my operating system, I'm trying to understand what I want to change in it in order to improve my workflow and that of my teams. For that, we have an operating system canvas. I will increase the size of the slide in a minute, but first I want to talk about this canvas generally, right? So, canvases are amazing. New workers love canvases. We always work with canvases. Why? Canvases are designed to make incredibly complex realities very, very simple. So there is 1-sheet documents, usually very workshop oriented, in a way to make something radically simple, to make it understandable and graspable, right? You may know the business model canvas, which is probably the most famous canvas in the work environment. A lot of people use the business model canvas to evaluate if their idea, to look at their business idea from end to end, or their business model from end to end. So in this canvas that we have developed, by the way, there's many different operating system canvases. I can even tell you there's one from, there's an operating system canvas from the Ready that I quite like. It's called even the OS canvas. It's downloadable, I think, online. Quite good one. I use my own here. I like this one. Let me make it bigger again for you. So what we do in this canvas is really focusing on the realities of middle management and looking at what are the things that impact your work life, right? And your team's work life. And we've separated it into 10 different categories. Strategy, so what is the purpose of not only the company, but our team, our unit? How do we define strategies? How do we plan something? How do we get funding for our ideas and our innovation projects or whatever we need funding for? Teams. How are we structured? How is our unit structured? But also how do we form teams and how do we define roles within teams on projects? Rhythms. Are there some organizational project or team rhythms that impact our workflow? Methods, like do we have methodologies that we use? Probably yes, but probably not scaled to the entire organization, or the unit. So what is the hybrid methodology landscape that is the core of the way we get stuff done here? Workflow. Do we have some workflow systems? Do we have certain meeting culture or rhythms, techniques, communication culture? That's an important piece. Tools. What is the digital tool suite that we use? Do we use it? How does it work for us beyond the smaller team that you're in right now? Decisions. Do we have certain decision-making routines? Information flow. Do we have access to information, and is it stored centrally? How do we learn our mastery? How do we get better? How do we share know-how? Because we're not supposed to say best practices anymore. How do we scale good practices, right? And an important piece is governance. And that is something that is changing in organizational culture a lot at the moment. How do we make sure that our governance decisions and governance meetings, so the changes to our workflow, changes to roles, are differing from our business meetings and business workflow? So this canvas is designed to really help you get an understanding of what your operating system is. And the way to do that is in 3 steps. So the first step is you map out your explicit and implicit realities. Let me make this a bit smaller again. So the first step is mapping out the explicit and implicit realities. So how do things work in your organization, right? The second step, when you've done this, and this cognitive download of your realities is already such a powerful feeling. It really helps us to drop some of this organizational anxiety and to assess and to look at the entire picture and feel good about it, actually, right? The second step is to pinpoint our pain points and high points. High points, what gives us energy? Where are we strong? What gives us really speed and action and power? But also pain points. Where are we still held back? What makes us slower? What makes us weaker, right? So let's make that explicit. Let's write it down, right? And then the third step for me is an important one. Create your own agenda as a middle manager. And when I say change agenda, I always mean 2 different things. One is the quick wins and one is the big wins. Quick wins and big wins. And start with the quick wins, because as a change professional, we all know by now that it is incredibly powerful to start with something small, to get going, to create some traction, to create some momentum for our agenda. Okay. I hope that wasn't too fast, because it's quite a bit of content. And I wanted to make sure that I give you one end-to-end view on the way we look at new work, because it's a big piece, but I hope these 30 minutes were kind of bringing everything together for you. Of course, this content is a teaser out of our New Work in Action Masterclass. So if you're interested in this sort of stuff, look at our website, newwork-masterclass.com. I can tell you a little bit about it. Let me tell you in 1 minute what we actually do. So we have 6 weeks of open class, 6 weeks, and that's 4 hours a week, where we do classes and workshops, all digital, of course. So we've been learning a lot on how to do this in the last year, of course, and we've come up with some really great and engaging and fun ways to be remote on things like a Miro board to facilitate great workshops. We have group coaching. That means if you've joined the classes, you get access for 1 year to a bi-weekly coaching call with me or other Agile and change coaches, where if you have questions on your implementation, so let's just say you learn about OKRs in our masterclass and you want to implement OKRs for your team and you have questions about that, so you can come into the bi-weekly coaching call and get instant feedback, get a peer review or feedback from the coach on if you're doing it right or how you can do it better. And of course, a great peer community with amazing companies all across Europe and even overseas. So where we have sometimes facilitated, sometimes not facilitated communities where you can exchange with other managers and executives in other companies. And one amazing thing about our masterclass are these guys. You're going to love them. These are somewhere between this is the who is who of new work and agility in Berlin. Our coaches who are providing you with amazing bonus material, live and pre-recorded, that will just enrich your masterclass experience to a whole new level, because you're getting so many different perspectives of these topics, because there is no right and wrong. There's just different perspectives when we talk about new work. So this is it. If you have any questions, you should post them latest by now, then I can have a look. If you want to get more information, our general website is bia.team. But if you want to go right into the masterclass, it's newwork-masterclass.com. We are right at 13:30, which means we are in time. Do we have any questions? I'm asking my colleague.
One from our Slack community. Which mindset is the most important to create and sustain a culture of innovation?
Okay, let me repeat. Which mindset or technique is the most important in an environment of innovation? I want to say the easy answer, but I don't think it's the right one. The easy answer is failure culture. And a lot of the conversation about innovation is all about a failure culture and how organizations need to learn to live it and empower people to work and fail, right? However, to me, that's not enough. So failure culture combined with experimentation techniques. So just to say, yes, we allow failure is great. It's a fantastic first step. But you want to learn how to very fastly collect data through experimentation iterations. So whatever method you use, whether it's sprint or lean startup or in a very early stage it's design thinking, but in an innovation environment, you want to make sure that you iterate fast on whatever hypothesis or product or idea you have and learn as soon as you can based on customer feedback. So experimentation techniques, whatever they are then, mostly lean startup, combined with failure culture that allows you to test stuff, that is super powerful. And it is actually the same for organization design, right? It's not just innovation. So we don't have the answers for everything in organization design yet. And what we want to do is we have to test what works for you in an org redesign, reinventing workflow environment. So even there, we have to know, let's experiment with a new technique or a framework or a method. Like, let's implement sprints and let's learn. Maybe it's going to suck and then we're going to fail and we're going to drop it again. But that mindset also has to come into the workflow innovation environment. I hope I answered that question.
One last, what's one new work tip you can leave the audience?
Oh, that's a good one. Let me repeat. What's one new work tip to give to the audience? I wonder, should I do a classic or should I do something cookie? Let's go with a classic. Let's go with check-ins. I mean, maybe it's too simple because everybody does check-ins, or a lot of people do check-ins. But when you start any kind of event or meeting or workshop, you do a check-in round where everybody gets a few seconds to say hello to the group, tell you what's on their mind, how they are in this meeting, how they have come here. Are there certain expectations of each person, but do they have a certain mood they're in? Do they have a certain bias connected to this topic? How are they here in this meeting? And it sounds a bit cheesy. Let's do a check-in round, everybody. But honestly, the most beautiful things in the world are always the simplest, right? And check-in rounds are so powerful to get everybody's attention and get everybody present. And because so many times we are in a meeting or any kind of event and half of the people are not present, or I don't understand their mindset, or how are they here? And a check-in round, if facilitated well, gives you an understanding of the presence of the people and how they are here. And that's super powerful for any environment. All right, guys. I think we have no more questions. If you have questions in the follow-up, please feel free to follow up with us, follow up with me personally or the program manager of our new Work Masterclass, Anna Bashir. She's always there working on the masterclass and the participants, and is always ready to answer any questions, as am I. I thank you very much for being part of our pilot edition New Work Snacks, our lunchtime webinar series. Thank you very much. Danke und auf Wiedersehen.